So to add a new query, you're going to click Add Query in the Quick Start menu on the right. And then you have Custom SQL as an option. And then you have a whole set of types of queries. We're going to start with the user query. You do need to know what type of query you need. So the question is, what is it that you're primarily trying to answer? Today, we're going to try to build a very basic query to help us get a list of all of our active users. So we'll start with users as query type. The rule of thumb is whatever you're putting in as the row. So if you want each user to be one row, then you would use users as your query type. If you wanted each action to be a row, you would use action as query type. Similarly, if you're doing aggregate reporting, it's what element are you aggregating on. And this is what the query builder looks like. So we're going to need to name our query. ActionKit will auto-populate a shortened name for you to use in the URL. And you can also add a description, which can be really helpful if you have multiple staff access using queries. Below the headline and the description, we have three sections. We have display, filters, and SQL. So the query builder will, as I mentioned before, return your results in table format. And you can also download it as a CSV. And based on the fields we select in display, that'll show our table columns, and filters, which are which rows are available. The SQL will be written for us. So display is select and filter is where. And then the we automatically write the from. Okay, so we're going to start with building a query with the built-in click and search feature. So we need to determine what data we want to later return from the database. And what we're setting up in the display is the columns of data for a table. Next is filtering, which, as I said, is the where statement in SQL. And then the SQL. Okay, let's make one. All right, I have a few tabs open, so bear with me as I figure out which tab is the correct one. Okay, so this is a sample report. Often, as I mentioned briefly earlier, if you're using the same, if you're trying to do a sandbox, or if you're trying to just figure out exactly what it is you want, you might want to create something like a sandbox for yourself, so that you don't end up with 50 million reports that are test 1, example 3. So you might want to work with your organization to figure out both sandboxes and naming conventions for your reports so that they make sense and don't create clutter. So simple report, this is typed to search. We're going to have the user ID, which will be their ActionKit ID, their full name. This can also be separated into first name and last name, which can be helpful depending on the type of data you're trying to get. Address. I'm going to sort this by US state. I'm sorting by US state because the data that's in our demo instance is pretty US focused, but this also will work internationally. So if you're using non-US data, there are international regions and also postcodes and countries. And then phone numbers. Okay, so that's the basics. And then in filters, we're going to limit the rows. You do have the option to actually do the equivalent of limit in SQL, but in this case, we're going to find all the active subscribers that we have. So I'm going to select subscription status is subscribed, And then I'm also going to say people whose number of actions, all of their actions have been completed on any date. So they've taken at least one action in the database. So folks who are both subscribed and have taken one action. So you can see the SQL down here. One thing you might notice is that the way that the SQL is generated doesn't use aliasing as much as if you were writing your own SQL. So as you're looking at the SQL down here, or as you're mixing in SQL with the query builder, just pay close attention to the way that the SQL is written. Okay, so I'm going to save the query and run it. This is another reason that you want to be careful on anything. So Chris and report demo. Because you get really ugly short names really fast without a naming convention. Okay, so now we have user IDs, and we have folks who have taken at least one action and who are subscribed to the list. These will show in line to a certain point, but if you have really large reports, then it will require you to download the results. Okay, and then we also have the option to go back and edit the report. And you can see the email or download results. You may or may not want it compressed, and you can email the results directly to yourself. So I'm going to go back and edit the report. The first exercise for this is you can build a query to generate a list of users. So this is just trying out how the query builder works. So you have a field organizer who needs a phone banking list, and they want to know the congressional district of each user. They only want active subscribed users, and they need phone numbers because it's a phone banking list. Yeah, and something that I, as I was prepping the presentation, remembered is that because we want phone numbers, let's see. So I had this written, and it didn't have, everyone didn't have phone numbers, and it's like, okay, this is the worst call list I've ever seen because half the people, more than half the people don't have phone numbers. And so I also wanted to filter by people who had, by people whose phone numbers were not empty, so that you got a legit looking call list that actually has phone numbers in it.
And you also maybe want to specify, since congressional districts is like focused, I mean, you know, it's only in the US, so you might also want to add like a country filter, just so the system isn't taking for too long and pulling in other random things. The more you know about the request, like you can feed in the filters, I think it just makes it, helps makes it clearer.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Great. Something that might be helpful to say as you're about to run that report is you can also limit the first X number of rows. So since you're working in your live database, limiting to that number of rows can make it take less time, and so that you can preview things directly on your screen rather than getting emails.
Another trick is if there's like if you anticipate a large data set, I just let it, I immediately hit download as a CSV. So it just runs and like goes into a CSV format or downloads as a CSV format that I can like send on to people. But yeah, for preview purposes, this is great, like limiting to the first 10 or 20 rows to make sure you're getting the data that you want.
So we can keep going then.
Great.
This is a basic version of what we put together that would answer this question, although the screenshot doesn't have the last element that I was talking about, which is having an actual phone number.
One question I have is, in this report, it gives you, like, somebody has 3 phone numbers.
Yeah.
Is it possible to, like, say, if they only have 1?
Yeah, so in Query Builder, we don't have anything that's basically like best phone number. We do have some SQL that I should probably add to the documentation that coalesces and recommends first the most recent mobile phone, then the most recent home phone, then the most recent work phone used for things like phone banking or texting. So I can add that to the Query Builder so that you don't have to write that, but you're basically using coalesce. That isn't something that's available in the Query Builder, though, I believe.
Okay.
You can, however, only get, even say only mobile phones, for example.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Okay,